BA Honours, PSY 05, Psychological Research. So, very good morning, dear friends. We are studying or we are talking or delivering lectures on the subject psychological research. This paper deals with the research methodology that when you go for the higher studies, doing MA or after the MA, then how you will conduct the research. What are the types of research, what are the variables of the type variables, then what are the methods of sampling, what are the tools, techniques which we will use, how we will analyze the data. That is separate paper we will talk about in statistical analysis. There is a separate paper. So, today we will talk about one of the tool, or you can say the technique by which we can collect the data when we go to the field for research, and that method is called as the case study method. Now, let us start case study. What is case study? How we will conduct it? What are its characteristics? All these details we will discuss in this lecture. Case study can be described as an approach that helps in obtaining information about the unit from the varied perspectives. Case study thus helps obtain in-depth information about the unit. Case study can be used to study not only individuals but organizations, institutions, events, and so on. Case study is also known as case report. Now, why the name is case? Case means the individual, the institution, the event, the organization, or anything whom you are going to study in detail is the case. As we go to the hospital, we say that this patient is the case of Dr. X. That means Dr. X will study in detail about the patient, that what are his problems, whether to operate or not, what medicines are to be. We say the case. When you go to the court, we say it is the case of advocate Y. That means case means the individual. Similarly, in psychology, in research method, when I say case, case means the individual to whom you are studying, the organization whom you are studying. For example, there is a organization, there is a institution, there is a factory, there is a productive unit, and in that productive unit, the production has been drastically decreased. The rate of absenteeism is increasing. There is dissatisfaction in the employees. Now, I will go to the institution and study that what are the reasons which produced dissatisfaction in the employees. That is because of that the production came down. The people started leaving the organization. Now, that organization whom I am studying will be called as my case. Similarly, any event, any phenomenon you study, that will be called as the case. So, don't get confused with the term case. Case means, I am repeating again, the individual, the event, the institution, the organization, the phenomenon whom we are studying is called as the case. That is why it is also known as I told you just now, it is also known as case report, because when I will study, I will prepare a report and give details about that case. That is why the second name is called as the case report method. Let us come to the psychology. In psychology, case study is frequently used in varied setups, including clinical setup, research, and so on. Case study can be termed as exploratory in nature, where in depth data is collected from the unit, per unit or participant using multiple methods of data collection. With the help of the case study method, it is possible to gather relevant and large amount of data. The information received, certain hypotheses can be formulated for further research. Now, when you do the case study, it is a type of exploratory in depth. We will go in the depth, we will try to know the maximum to minimum, the major to minor details of the individual or the institution whom I am studying. That is why unit means institution, or the person, participant, it may be more than one person. Then in this technique, I will tell you after this, in this technique, number of techniques we are using to collect the data, and those informations are combined and analyzed, and then we come to a certain conclusion. Now, when certain conclusion we have reached at, then we can formulate hypothesis that this was the reason by which this happened. This was the reason by which these problems in the individual entered into, creeped into, or came into, or these were the hypotheses. This may be the reason, that is why the production came down. So, on the basis of a case study, even we formulate hypotheses which help us to study further, do the research and other things. Now, case studies versus case history. Now, sometime the case study and case history, they are used as the synonym, but we will talk about here the minor difference. As mentioned above, a case study refers to a research method where a person, group or an event is being investigated. A case history, on the other hand, to a record of the data which contributes to a case study. The word history means putting events in a chronological order. Now, what is case history and case study? Case study is more broader. With the help of the case history, we will give inputs to study that case. What is history? What is the history? History simply putting events in a chronological order. If you put events in a sequence of time sequence, that will become the history. For example, this method, case study method or the case history, is prominently used in clinical psychology. When a person comes to us with certain problems, then we use this technique. Now, there is a child who is mentally challenged. Now, if he is mentally challenged, what are the reasons for that? From where the mental retardation or the mental challenge has entered in? That starts from the day the mother conceives. So, history of the person starts from the day mother conceives till today. What were the events which cause mental challenge to the fetus inside the womb of the mother when she was pregnant? There might be some infection, there is some toxication, there might be the effect of the X-rays, the other effects, the emotional state of the mother, the nutritive state of the mother. Now, these all factors contribute to the intelligence or the mental status of the child who is going to take the birth. Then, after the birth, when he took the first cry, whether the child fell down during the when he was just 1 or 2 months old, what happened when he entered the school. That means right from the time to when the mother conceived till today, we will collect all information. So, putting events in a chronological order, it will become the history, and the data collected in this history will contribute to study the case which we are taking in hand. So, this is more, rather you can say, case history provides cues, provides data for the case study. Sometimes, that I have already told you, people take that they are the same term, but this was a minor difference. Case study is actually a tool of the research, and case study for the particular individual or the case. Now, I will talk about, I think now the difference is clear, case study in research, because if I have to teach you case study, then my angle may be different, little bit different, but now we are doing case study in research. So, we will talk about how case study is used in the research. When case study is used in research, it is important to first of all identify the focus of research, which in turn will guide the way the case. What is the case? I again within the bracket, unit or event or phenomenon etc. is to be studied by the researcher. In this case, suitable research questions can be formulated so that there is a clarity in the problem and objectives of the study. Also, it is important to review the literature in this regard so that researcher has adequate background knowledge, though this is true with any research. Now, when you start the case study method, first of all, you identify the focus areas. What are the focus areas which you want to study? The focus area. For that, you will have to go to you will have to study the literature, that well, this in this event, this may be the reason, this may be the reason, from whom I will collect the data, with whom I will ask the question. If I am asking the question to the parents, then what will be my questions? So first of all, you focus, decide the areas, the focus are on which you are interested in the data collection. After this, the case study is necessarily complex, as any unit will have numerous dimensions like personal, social, economical, political, etc. and so on. Once the focus of the study is clear, then the methods of the data collection can be finalized. There are various methods of data collection which can be used in the case study method. Now, whom you are studying in the case? The individual, the organization, the institution. Now, the person whom you are studying is not a simple. He or she is very complex. His psychological state, his physical state, his social state, his mental state, etc., etc., all will affect his behavior or the personality. So, if the dimensions are so broad, so we must decide that which dimensions we are to study, and we are to collect the data, so that we get the exhaustive information about the individual. Now, for this, there will be various methods. If you want to do, for example, you are interested in personality or cognitive, then I will say I will go for the psychological testing. If you want to the naturalistic behavior, we will talk about now, just now, we will say we will go to the observation. So, the focus area, the area which you have pointed out, will decide that which technique, tool you will use in the case study method. So, which methods are to be used will depend on research questions and objectives. What are the objectives of your research? That will decide that which method we will use in the case study. The researcher will also need to decide about whether a single case will be taken or a small sample. This will again be determined by research problem and objectives. When you do the case study, it is not necessary that you take only one subject. You may take more than one subject. It may be small sample. That will depend upon the nature of the problem which you have taken for the research. Now, if you have taken that in my research, I will suppose the problem is with the organization. The institution is my organization. I am to study that organization. Now, nature of the problem is that how senior subordinates, directors and workers behave in the organization, what is interaction between them. So, that means now in that institution, I will have to study the executives, I will have to study the senior subordinates, I will have to study the workers. So, don't get confused. In case study, it is not necessary that it may be on single subject, it may be more than one subject. That will depend on the objective and nature of the problem. Once the data is collected, the researcher can start organizing and analyzing it, and while doing so, the research question and focus need to be kept in mind. Otherwise, the main focus of the research can get lost. Once the data is analyzed, the researcher can then focus on preparation of report with interpretation, evidence and conclusions. You see, as in the beginning we told you, I talked about that a huge amount of data is collected. Now, in that data which is relevant to me, relevant means which is more relevant to the nature of my problem, which is more relevant to the questions which I have raised in my research. So, we will connect that data with our objectives or the focus area, and then we will analyze, interpret and prepare a report. Now, let us talk about characteristics of the case study. What are the different characteristics when we are using this method in the research? Number one, significant features of the case study method are: number one, a single unit or a small sample is studied under case study. I have told you that it may be one or it may be more than one. So, a single unit or a small sample can be taken in the case study. Next, it is in-depth, thorough, comprehensive study of the unit be it an individual, even organization, etc. Either individual or organization, whosoever it may be, whatsoever it may be, we will do the in-depth study. In-depth study means we will go in the details. As I told you, history, putting events in a chronological order. In case study, we talk about the details, different dimensions, because we have just talked about psychological state, physical state, social state, mental state, economic state, political state, whatever not, environmental state. So, it will be in-depth study. It can be termed as a direct approach. We are directly talking about the persons, so it is a direct approach. Case study also focus on reciprocal interrelationship of the variable and factors. Now, when I say reciprocal interrelationship of the variables and factors, now whether the psychological and the physical factors are related, whether because of the physical state the psychological problem has come, because the problem in the person may be emerged by the interaction. You might have heard one of the disease is psychosomatic. Now, if you break up the word psychological, somatic, soma means body, physiology. The psychological factor when affects the body, the physiology, that disease becomes the psychosomatic. Peptic ulcer is a psychosomatic, bronchial asthma is a psychosomatic, ulcerative colitis is a psychosomatic, anorexia nervosa is a psychosomatic, eczema is a psychosomatic. Now, even the cancer has been considered to be psychosomatic. So, now when we will go to the depth study, we will try to find out the interrelationship of the variables. It can be termed as an exploratory and descriptive in the way the information is obtained and the unit is analyzed. As I told you, it is an exploratory type of the method. The unit that is studied is perceived as a whole. The unit, it may be individual, again I am repeating, may be individual, may be organization, may be event, it will be perceived as a whole, not in a segregated parts. It is a whole. Now, if I am studying an organization, all the employees, executive, senior subordinates, workers, even the persons who are for the helping for providing tea, water, my chokidar, my gate man, my gunman, or security person will treat it as a whole. So, not in the different parts. Multiple methods of data collection are used to study the unit. Now, what are those methods? We will talk about. Multiple methods of the data collection can be used. We are talking about that will depend upon the nature of the problem or the focus area will decide that which technique is to be used. The unit that is selected for the study is often for a long time period, though in certain cases a limited time may be specified using varied method so as to obtain necessary information. Now, you see, when you are doing in-depth study, exploratory study, then the duration of the study may be longer. It may be longer. It is not that in a day or today, in a just 1 day or the 2 days or 3 days, I may be complete. So, depending upon the nature of the problem, the time period may be short or the time period may be long. So, we must be prepared. That is why in the bracket I have mentioned, though in certain cases, a limited time may be specified. Now, if the nature is such, I am to focus only on the executives, then the time period will be, I can keep the time period short. If I am to study only one individual who has approached me for the help, for the solving his problems, then I may specify the period, because in a 3, 4, 5 days, I will know about his details. So, that depends upon the nature of the problem. That will enable the researcher to make interpretation and raw conclusions. Now, what are the advantages of case study method? When you are using this method, what are its advantages? It can be effectively used to not only develop a new theory, but also challenge or modify an existing theory. Now, you are doing the case study and you have a theory before that. Now, when you have studied the case study method, that case results may verify the case theory or may contradict it. If it is contradicted, the results are contradictory with the existing theories, then Either we will modify the existing knowledge or we can give a new theory. In depth and exhaustive about the unit can be collected. Number of times I have talked you exhaustive study we can do. This method helps to know the etiology of a problem in the case. Etiology means the cause, that what are the causes which are responsible for the problem. Now, a person has developed a stress. The reason may be psychological, the reason may be physiological, the reason may be social. So, what is the etiology? Which factor is responsible for bringing stress in the individual, which is disrupting his behavior or making his behavior pathological. So, this method helps us to know even the etiology of the problem. It provides idea for further research. Clear? Certain unique cases, events and phenomenon can be studied in detail with the help of this method. There are certain unique cases which you can study with the help of this method. Because the time limit, I cannot be able to quote you the cases. Number of cases I have seen, I have examined, I have seen, I have treated, in which a particular individual came and because of certain social problems, the customary problems, the cultural problem, the values problem, some problems came in that individual and he became a schizophrenic. So, this was a unique case because of the value crisis, that individual became schizophrenic patient. So, certain unique cases we may try to help or we may know the reasons, the etiology. The information collected cannot only be used to formulate certain hypotheses, but it can also be used to develop schedules and the questionnaires. It is not only helpful in formulating hypotheses, even the results may tell you, well, okay, now these are the findings I never imagined. So, I can prepare a questionnaire on the basis of the results. So, it is even helping not only for the research, but it helps on the making questionnaire or the schedule. When you are making questionnaire or the schedule, you are preparing a new research tool. That means it not only helps us to diagnosis, but also helps us to preparing the tools. It is possible to use multiple method data. Multiple method can be used. Collection as per the need we have talked about. What are the limitations of the case study? The results obtained cannot be generalized. This is the problem. Usually we say that science is a social institution. The fruits of the science is for not me, for whole society. That means whatever the results will come, that will be generalized. But since here we are talking about only depth study of the individual, the organization, the results cannot be generalized, that are limited to only that unit, that individual. It is a time consuming and also certain level of expertise and skills are required on part of the researcher. It is a time consuming because if you are to study the individual as a whole, it is not that experimentation testing, the person has come to you, you administer a test, you will know his IQ, personality. It is a time consuming process, and the person who is using this technique must have certain skills also, testing skill, interview skill, how to administer the questionnaire, observation skills, number of skills are required in the individual. We can creep in during the interpretation of data. Replication of study may not be possible. Certain errors may creep in and replication is just not possible. Whom we can replicate? A certain phenomenon. Now, here we are studying the individual. Now, how I can replicate that individual, the findings of that individual, because the problems are his individual. That is why, when we are studying the individual, it becomes a idiographic study. Usually case study method in maximum cases idiographic, not nomothetic. Clear? Nomothetic science is that which talks about the general, and idiographic is that which talks about the individual. Now, number of times I have said you that techniques will be used as per the requirement, as per the nature of the problem. Now, what are the techniques which you can use? Following methods are generally used in the case study method. Observation you can use, interview you can use, questionnaire you can use, and psychological tests you can use. Now, we have talked about in detail in some lectures, that is in your course, observation. You just observe the person, so no need to repeat what is the observation. You do the interview, Now, interview may be structured, unstructured, depending upon the nature of the problem. But in case of the case study, we will prefer unstructured interview. Why? Because when you are interviewing the person, you don't know, a new area may emerge. The person may say, I have some problem with Mr. X. You didn't imagine that the problem may be arising Mr. X, the family member, or Mr. X working on the workplace. We just don't know. So, in unstructured, we can form a questions and then we can ask some questions again that these are the questions. Then questionnaire method we have talked about in detail. Then psychological testing. Psychological testing since is an objective method and standardized. We have talked about reliability, validity, norms, what is psychological tests. So, they are preferred. If you want to know the at cognitive level, do the intelligence testing. You want to know the personality, do the personality testing. Emotional state, you can study the emotional intelligence. You want to know the attitude scales. You want to know the interest inventories, aptitude tests, because they are objective. That is why psychological tests are also preferred in the case study method. Now, I have just given in short, if you want to prepare a case study, what points you will take in the first will the focus of the study. Case study of a clinical case. I have just prepared for you. First of all, A, the present status. What is the present status of the client or the person who has approached or whom we are studying? Adaptation in life situation, systematic behavior, motivation for clinical care, and behavior in clinical. When the person enters in the clinical, how he is behaving? Observation. Now, I will do the observation. Clear? Adaptation in life situation, I will take the interview. I will ask certain questions and we will see that how he is adapting himself in the life situation. I will say a crisis has come, how you will adapt. So, first of all, we must know the present status of the individual. Then B, manifest personality, biological features, temperament, manifest personality traits, interpersonal behavior, how he is interacting with the others in the society, what the temperament, what is his personality problem, he is an introvert or the extrovert. Suppose he is a very introvert person, very introvert person, but he has chosen a job of the salesperson or where the interaction is very important. So, now he is misfit for the job, that is why the problems have creeped in. So, the manifest personality we can study by the personality testing. I have told you that we have a lot of personality tests. See, personality dynamics and structure. What are the motives and effects? What are the moral principles? What are the ego functioning? Ego functioning means moral principles, you know, whether he is moralistic or not, whether he believes in the value system or not. Ego functioning, logical thinking. Your future, you have short term long perspectives of the life or long term perspective of the life. If I have short term, I have this problem, sir, give me relief of this problem, short term. Now, I want long term, I want to get that this problem should be cured from the root, then it will be your long term perspective. So, how your ego functioning is doing, how you are moral principles, then your value system, this will be done by the testing. Then social determinants. Now, we have you see, if you go back, we have done the present status, we have done the personality, then dynamics and the structure. Now, we will talk about the social determinants, that means group membership, family, education and work, and the social ecology. These are all important. You know, we say that in our culture, I am talking about the Indian culture, the social support is one of the biggest asset of our culture. We are concerned about the problem of our elders, brothers, sisters, or even the neighbors or of the person of society. Now, whether the person, the case whom I am treating, whether the social support is there or not, is that culture providing social support, whether the family is cohesive or not, whether the family is more rigid on moral values or it is flexible, whether the family is listening to the problems of the child or not. So, the family environment, the person where he is getting the education, what are the type of the teachers, the community, that is also important, and the social ecology means culture. These are all important. I will do in the case study method. Then we will talk about stresses and coping potential and recommendation and prediction. Now, when I say stresses and coping potential, what are his stresses? Which area he is feeling stress and how he is managing the stress. When you are doing the stress, usually we adopt two phenomenon, ego defense or the coping style. Ego defense means we develop some excuses, rationalization, projection, sublimation. We will talk in detail about this when we come to the topic somewhere. And coping means we attack the problem and try to solve the problem, that is coping. And after that, all this we will make the recommendations, that these are my recommendation on the basis of the case study, and the prediction that if I do this, this type of the behavior will occur in that. In this way, case study method becomes a very important tool for the research method. But particularly, this technique is much more useful when we are dealing with the persons or the organization which have some problems, the mentally challenged, the mentally sick persons or the organizations having the problems. We use the case study method and then exhaustive depth study, then we do the recommendation and make prediction, and if this thing is done, the problem may be solved. So, this was all about case study method. Thank you very much.